Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren joined by Michael Stamps here for a very exciting week of things to talk about for Mizzou football and men's basketball. Men's basketball with a big win on the recruiting trail with Jason Crowe Jr. And then the main focus for this episode, football with fall camp starting next week, so we can finally get to see on the field all these things we've been talking about all offseason. So we're going to be talking about some of those top storylines for that, some of the top players to watch. Excited for all of that. But first, we're going to talk about Jason Crowe Jr. And for that, we're going to be joined by Killian Wright, other basketball writer here at Missouri on SI, to talk about what this commitment means for the Missouri Tigers. So, I mean, let's start with you, Michael. I mean, just what was your main reaction to Crowe committing in the moment, even though it really wasn't, by the time it actually came, was not a surprise at all?
It feels like it should be more surprising than what it really was. I mean, like we knew there was a chance that this was going to happen, and the rumors kind of sparked up leading up to his commitment date. So it technically wasn't much of a surprise, kind of like you said, but it felt like that should have been there more. But I mean, it's pretty darn incredible. I don't feel like I could speak or like say any more words to talk about how big of a move it really is. Obviously, I had the chance to talk to Jason and his dad. Would have been on Tuesday the 22nd here, and had that story come out on Wednesday morning, and learned a lot about what that process was like. But the my big takeaway from what I learned with them was that it was truly a fit thing and a culture thing, and the relationships. And I obviously none of us were in the room for the conversations between Tim Fuller, Dennis Gates, Jason, and his family. But Jason's dad said over and over and over again about how impressive of a connector and a relationship builder that Tim Fuller was. And I think it had been alluded to by some people on social media that Tim Fuller was one of the driving forces behind this commitment. And we don't need to get into Tim and Jason Sr.'s history, but they go back a while. And so actually do Jason's dad and Dennis Gates. So there was a lot of history and connections there. And I think it seems like, Jason's father had a lot of respect for those two going into this. And then when Dennis reached out, that kind of sparked things from there. So that was kind of my big takeaway from my conversation with those two. But yeah, I mean, it's a huge move. We're going to talk about it here more in a second, but I think it could be the start of something very, very special for this 2026 class.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about Tim Fuller in a little bit here more, but first off to you, Killian. I mean, we've talked so much about what this means just for the program, and obviously they're getting a really talented player. But do you think, and how much, if so, does this move the needle or push Missouri onto more of a center stage in the national landscape, kind of taking a wider view for it? I mean, obviously making the NCAA tournament, getting a lot of really big wins in the most popular conference and most talented conference in the country this past year. But what do you think this commitment specifically says about where they're at now?
I think what it's going to say is, obviously, whenever Crowe gets here, we're still waiting on maybe some potential other commitments that could be on the way in light of Crowe. But for the most part, when he gets here, I think his freshman season will probably be the biggest spotlight that's been on Mizzou basketball since the Michael Porter Jr. stuff. But even then, he couldn't play too much. So yes, there was talk about that, but he wasn't actually on the court very much. So I think a lot of the things that Mizzou fans will kind of gripe about, or media will gripe about sometimes, about, hey, everyone's forgetting about the Tigers. What's going on? Why is Missouri not on these big lists? Why are they not on ESPN top 10? Like, I think you're probably going to see a lot of that whenever Crowe gets here. Whether that translates to a direct winning success and specifically postseason success, that's going to be a little bit harder to tell. Obviously, there's some teams who do really good by bringing in 5-star freshmen right away, like Duke this year. There's other teams who don't do too well, like Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC. It's a little hard to survive on just freshmen, but obviously you have to trust the rest of the roster and the way that's constructed. But I think no matter what, the one thing you can take away from it is that a lot of eyes will be on the Tigers whenever Crowe steps foot.
Right, and that's obviously a plus. And I think that's my main thought with Tim Fuller's role in all of this, and just even in the past 2 weeks, what we've seen from the program, and I mean, I would even include their social media presence in this. And I think the fact that they had the All Access tour with the YouTube channel this past week, where Dennis Gates is given the whole speech on the program that we've heard over the past few years of him being here. I don't think that's a mistake. And then a connection with Tim Fuller there, and he's obviously had the connections, like you mentioned, Michael, with that family. So I think we are already seeing the plan for Tim Fuller really starting to go into effect. And that was when he was hired, my main thought of this is not only somebody that is going to be able to take some stress off of the schedule of Dennis Gates and his whole assistant coaching staff, but it's also going to be basically another head coach as far as connections and skills go as a recruiter. And so on that note, looking forward, do you guys think, I'll ask both this, just how does your perspective on the future of this program change with Crowe in the picture now?
I think that, I'll go. I think that just the fact that Gates and Fuller were able to kind of get their first big hit is kind of ridiculous that they were already able to do that. Obviously, when the Scotty Atkinson news broke a few weeks back, everyone was like, "Wow, this is great," and that kind of maybe lessened the surprise a little bit for Crowe whenever people found out, "Whoa, Mizzou's in the mix." I think it really solidifies Tim Fuller's status specifically. As far as going forward, I think that like we're in the early stages right now of Gates and Fuller becoming like the best recruiting duo in the nation as far as basketball goes. You can definitely make an argument for that. We'll see what happens over the next few months, but I think there's something there. I mean, everyone knows how good of a recruiter Gates has been over the last couple of years of his Tigers tenure. And now adding a guy like Fuller who just has connections on top of connections on top of connections, and then also getting the testament from guys like Crowe Sr. on just how good of people and good of connectors, like you guys mentioned, they are and how much they relate to these players. I think it's something really special that's kind of in the early stages right now. And even in these early stages is really impressive.
I mean, when you look at Missouri's 2024 class, which was Dennis Gates' second class there, he pulled in one of the best classes in the country full of 4-star talent without Tim Fuller. So I think that could have been a sign, maybe that the possibility of them being together could have been, what we're seeing now. I'm going to be completely honest, and this is not Tim Fuller specific. It's more of the position specific. I had no idea what to expect when Gates and his staff brought on Tim Fuller as a general manager, and it's more of the position. Like I said, how are we going to see this guy make an impact? Because obviously he's doing a ton of behind the scenes work. I'm sure more has happened than we even know about, but it seems like we're getting a public display of what's going on with obviously Jason's commitment, but like that all access video, which like really came out of nowhere and was like, I didn't learn anything, and I'm sure you guys didn't learn anything, but that's a really cool look for fans and things like that. And create such an interesting social media presence. So I didn't know how Tim Fuller was going to make his presence felt. And this is like exceeding any expectation I thought I had, especially on the recruiting end. Like I said, maybe subconsciously I thought that it could get this good. But the fact that they landed Jason and he's one of the premier recruits in the country, and we don't need to do a scouting report, but we've seen the film, and I would imagine most people have too. This is, that ranking is justified. He was putting up 30 points per game in the EYBL and the Peach Jam. So, he is a prolific scorer. He's going to be pretty incredible. I don't know. I don't know how long he's going to be in Columbia, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't know how long he's going to be there. He is definitely a guy with NBA hopes, so he could be a one and done dude, but you kind of said it, Killian. Teams can succeed with those guys as long as they have the right guys around him. But nonetheless, like making the University of Missouri a premier location for recruits is an impressive thing in itself. And it's not a diss on the university or the program at all, because it's in a really good state right now. But obviously there have been these teams that have dominated the college basketball recruiting landscape for, I mean, as long as we've been alive, like your Duke and Kentucky and Kansas and things like that. And we've slowly seen schools kind of move into that group as well. Like Arkansas comes to mind. They recruit at a really high level, and obviously they have John Calipari now, but still they recruit at a really high level. And there have been other teams who have done the same. So yeah, I mean, this is, like I said, this is super impressive. I didn't know what to expect bringing in Tim Fuller. And again, the fact that they have Jason, who is this top 10 recruit, could move up higher in the rankings. I wouldn't be surprised when the class is all said and done if he ends up being the highest rated recruit in Missouri history. That wouldn't shock me at all. But the fact that there's still Tony Bryant, who's a top 20 player in the country, and then you have your Aiden Chronister, Tristan Reed, Ethan Taylor, who are all ranked in the top 100. Obviously, they're not going to land all 5 of those guys. I would probably say it's going to be at most 4-man class, probably 3. But you got to think landing Jason helps the odds with those other ones. And the fact that, these guys now know that Missouri can be a landing spot for top talent. So I think that's kind of my big takeaway as well, that Jason did it. And his, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember if I included this in my story or not. There was a lot to include, but I asked Jason and his dad about keeping the recruitment close to the chest, which is fair, and honestly, like, respect to them, because I'm sure the publicity you gain from just being a top recruit, going through a recruitment process, is probably pretty stressful. And I also asked Jason Jr. about if he's going to be recruiting or if he plans on working on getting anyone else in the class, and he said no at the moment. But Jason's dad made a good point, said that him being there this early, and he can be in Columbia and make a presence in the community, but the fact that he committed this early, allows him to focus in on Missouri, themselves, but also allows for him and gives him that time to help bring others in the class. So I think he made a good point, not saying that there's anyone specific in mind that they're going to go after, but alluding to the fact that now he has the time to work on other guys to come to the class. So a lot of good takeaways there, but pretty impressive stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then sticking on this note of just looking to the future for this program, because ultimately I think the people who have questions about Dennis Gates that I think are valid questions, no matter what recruiting wins he gets, they're still going to have the same questions of what is going to be the actual on-court coaching, are those decisions going to be enough in those crucial moments? Because those are the big questions for Dennis Gates, because he has been recruiting good enough for a couple of years now, but still the same questions that some people have about his substitutions and his coaching methods, things like that, can't be answered by getting a recruit. It's not going to be answered until he gets past the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament. So for both you guys, and starting with Killian again, I mean, do you think Dennis Gates is the coach that can take this team to a Final Four, a national championship, and does this recruiting move that needle at all?
Pushing to a national championship is hard to say for any coach who hasn't made it very close yet, but that's not to call Gates a bad coach in any sort of capacity. It kind of takes steps of getting there, you'll make it to the Sweet 16 first, and then you'll maybe make a Final Four appearance, and it might not be linear progress, but then maybe you'll eventually get to that national championship level. And to be honest, while obviously he's not perfect with some of the on-court stuff as far as rotations and certain lineups, and some of the defensive schemes of zone, it's not perfect, but it's not downright bad like some people make it out to be. I think there's a lot to work with. Obviously, he's had some things go very not in his favor in that 23-24 season that was not ideal. But I think that kind of obviously put a big tarnish on his reputation. And he really bounced back last year. I thought, yes, the Tigers probably should have made maybe the round of 32. Drake was not a very good matchup for him. They faced a really tough team that just kind of had Missouri beat in a lot of aspects. That was maybe even predetermined. So unfortunate matchup there. But I think with the talent Gates got, it's not like he is severely, ridiculously underperforming. Yes, you would like it to be better, but it's nothing that can even remotely put him on the hot seat yet. He's still got double-digit conference wins last year. I think there's enough reason to believe that, especially after maybe getting a guy like Crowe and then maybe one of those other guys like Michael mentioned, Ethan Taylor, Tony Bryant in that class, on top of some growth from some of the current core like the 2024 and 25 classes. I think there's reason to believe that he can take that group pretty far. Next year will be a testament to his coaching because he's in a bit of a similar situation as 2 years ago when he lost some of his top scorers. So that will be kind of a prove it year maybe to see how much he can really hang in the SEC despite some big losses from guys like Bates and Grill. But as far as the future goes, whenever Crowe gets here, I think that will be a really big year for Gates and his future at Mizzou to say, hey, if you're going to get this top 10 recruit, if you're going to get multiple of these top 30, 40 recruits, we want to see some results. We want to see a Sweet 16 appearance. We want to see an Elite 8 appearance. So I think there's going to be some pressure on Gates to perform, but I do think he can do it. And I think he's Missouri's guy. And I think the culture he set and how much all the players love him and how much the program respects him, I would think he's the guy, and I feel pretty confident in that.
I mean, one thing I like to keep in mind, and I just had to fact check this, but Dennis Gates has only been a head coach since 2019, so like 5 or 6 years. So he is still gaining head coaching experience. And I don't remember what his postseason success was like at Cleveland State, if there was any. Maybe I think they might have made the tournament a time or two. But like Killian said, it takes time, and you learn how to win big games. This is like a bit of a out of nowhere comparison, but when I think about a coach like Jay Wright, who is maybe one of the best college coaches of all time, or one of the better ones, at least one of the more respected ones, it took him like at least 10 years to win a national championship. I think it's a lot more, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But it took him a while to win a national championship, right? And so I think, not that there's an expectation for Missouri to, do exactly that, but like, the expectation certainly could be haltered a little bit because he's still learning how to coach and win big games. And yeah, like Killian said, and like you alluded to, Joey, that maybe there's some on-court questions. And if you're going to bring in the talent like this, there's going to be an expectation to win games. And I think people will expect them to win games because of that. But he's still learning how to coach. He has a good coaching staff around him. You would think that would help him make some of those decisions, like a offensive defensive coordinator type thing. But yeah, I don't really have any disagreements with what you said, Killian. If you bring in the talent, there's going to be an expectation for results. There's not always a correlation between the two, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. It's worth mentioning that 5-star players don't, bring in results all the time, and I'm not like specifying any player in certain, but like there have been Kentucky teams or Duke teams in the past, just for example, that have brought in plenty of high-end talent and haven't done anything in the NCAA tournament, or they've lost a lot of games during the regular season, or like you kind of said, Killian, like Texas and Trey Johnson, who was a top 10 recruit, I believe, in that class. They maybe barely made the NCAA tournament or didn't. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's that sort of thing that doesn't automatically bring success. So it's obviously about the guys surrounding them and player development, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, I agree with what you said, Killian. But there will be an expectation for results with Crowe coming in, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Right, and the biggest thing I would say with Gates in this program that both of you guys alluded to is just the very intentional steps there is, and like you said, again, both of you guys hit on, of still being, one, young in his career, but especially in his tenure at Missouri. That's important to keep in mind. And I remember I asked him at some point this season, because he's talked so much about, pretty much every single season there's been at least one game, usually it's a loss, where he says we're in the infant stages of building a program. And so I asked him at some point this year, like, so, one, what do you mean by that? Two, like, what exactly, like, are the steps, how do you view these steps? Is it like from a year to year type picture, or is it a much longer term picture? And the answer was a much longer term thing. His answer, he said to me, it was a great answer of wanting to coach here for 30 years. And obviously there's smaller steps that go into that. But again, like you said, Killian, it does take incremental growth in both results, but then obviously like your player development, your development as a coach and as a coaching staff, that it takes time to get there. So obviously, yeah, like you guys said, in the same way that there was disappointment this year for a team that at certain points showed some flashes as a top 15 team in the country to end up, I mean, really failing in the NCAA tournament. In the same way that fell short of expectations, there's going to be expectations because of this recruiting that are going to make it difficult to kind of take that long view, and he's going to have to get results at some point. Obviously, it can't all just be excused for being in the infant stages of building something bigger. But I do think it is interesting to take that long view that Gates has for it. So anything else to add on this conversation, guys?
Would you think it's fair to say that, let's say next season, so 25-26, the Tigers either just miss out on the NCAA tournament or they make it and they lose in the round of 64 again, and then they still keep Crowe coming into the next year? Would you say that it's fair to say that that will be the most pressure Gates has ever faced as a coach? Or was it more the past year coming off the winless conference schedule?
I would say it's this past year. I feel like, yeah, there was definitely some, yeah, if he didn't, I think we talked about this right ahead of this past season of the pressure on him and kind of like what would it take for him to get really on the hot seat. And I think we said like a little below 500 in the SEC, and then it starts getting a little bit concerning. But I definitely do think, yeah, in the same way, there definitely be pressure to deliver in that next year.
I agree with both of you guys. I just wanted to add one more point. I expected to cover a couple 5-star guys in our time in college. I didn't expect it to be on the basketball side, if I'm being completely honest. So it speaks a lot to Dennis Gates and Tim Fuller and what they've been able to do as recruiters so far. And I mean, landing Jason Crowe, like I alluded to, sets the stage for not only guys in 2026, but maybe there are others in 2027. A lot of guys close. There's some St. Louis guys and some like Link Academy and Sunrise Christian guys that I guarantee that Gates and Missouri will be able to go after and will go after and probably are going after right now. So this might not be the last 5-star guy that we see commit to Missouri on the basketball side of things, which is, I mean, impressive, but also pretty cool, I think.
All right. Good talk. Exciting stuff for the program. We're going to say goodbye to Killian now and take a look towards this football team. So thanks for joining us, Killian.
Yep, anytime.
All right. Now looking ahead to this football team. Again, I feel like we've talked about so much of this all off season long, and now we're just kind of finding different angles and opinions to take on it. And ultimately in this fall camp, obviously there's so much built up to it for a good reason, and it's obviously worth paying attention to, but there's only so much we are privy to until that really final press conference before the season with Drinkwitz. But we'll be there all fall camp, every practice that they let us in, every period that they let us in. We will be there reporting on it, trying to take some observations. I'd also put a warning out there, though, that if you follow us on Twitter or any reporter on Twitter or even the @Mizzou football account on Twitter, to not react to everything. Not every great catch it means the guy is going to be a great wide receiver. But of course, that is good. That's what most of fall camp and training camp is good for, overreactions. So I would recommend only doing that with caution, though. But we're going to take a look here. We're going to go position by position on kind of the storylines we're looking for, and specifically to what we're looking to see from these players, because we've talked so much about the competitions, especially last week. We talked about the competition at quarterback, at corner, at left tackle, But this week specifically, taking a look at, I want to see this guy do this and see who ends up winning those competitions. And obviously there'll be some prizes too. But let's start off with our players to watch. We're going to name a returner, a transfer, and a freshman to watch at each position for this fall camp. So, Michael, I'll let you start off. What do you have for your 3 players on offense?
I don't know if you just saw me do that, but I just splashed this in my eye. Oh,
I was wondering.
Oh man, no, I'm not crying. I promise. My right eye is burning. Okay, my goodness, I wasn't expecting that to happen. A little caught off guard. Yeah. So my returner to watch is Brett Norfleet. I think everyone knows how good he is, but I think it's time to see him in a full year of healthy production at the level that we think he can play at. Obviously, there was glimpses of him as a freshman, and then we didn't really see the full Brett Norfleet experience last year. Outside of him jumping over people. So I think it's time. I think it's time to see the full version of Brett Norfleet this year. Keep him healthy. We'll talk about tight ends here in a second, but it is kind of exciting that there is so much depth at the position. So I think I feel more comfortable now. If Norfleet were to go down again, I feel more comfortable with the depth they have there. But beyond the point, excited to see what Brett Norfleet can bring to the table. My transfer, you said we wanted to take different angles, so I decided to talk about Keegan Truss, and I don't know how much there is to say about him outside of the fact that he's been labeled as the super consistent presence at his position, and I just want to see it happen. I don't take Pro Football Focus grades into account like 100%, but he wasn't necessarily the highest graded guy on their team, so that stood out to me a little bit. But obviously he was still super steady the whole season long. I just want to see that again and see that early on. I think that's going to be super helpful to have a new voice on that offensive line outside of Green and Tolson that will bring some consistency and leadership to the offensive line. So interested to see what Keegan Truss brings to the table. I mean, there's a reason he was named a starter so early on, and we haven't really questioned it at all. I don't really see a universe where we would have to question it. I mean, there is Jalen Early there if something were to happen, or he's not as good as he's advertised, but I feel like that's not going to be the case. So excited to see what Keegan brings to the table. I don't think he's a super flashy player by any means, but I think he's going to be very consistent and steady. And then my freshman to watch, I kind of just picked one. So I'm going with Sean Terry. I don't know if he's going to play much at all. I mean, I feel like I've talked a lot about Donovan, and I think you've talked a lot about Donovan, and you just made a video about Donovan. So I decided that we don't need to talk about him anymore, even though he's incredible. Going with another freshman receiver, Sean Terry has incredible speed. If they want another guy to help out in the return game, I think this is going to be one that they take a look at. I don't remember what his return stats were from this past season, but they were pretty darn impressive. He has incredible speed, a little bit smaller, but he could be a really fun gadget guy. Just add some more depth to the receiver room as well. I think if they really need him to play, or maybe he stands out over some of the bottom guys in the receiver room. I mean, I don't think anything is certain in the receiver room, like 100% solidified outside of Coleman, Johnson, and Josh Manning, and maybe Donovan, but still maybe there's a universe where he's not ready to go yet. So there's definitely a small possibility that Sean Terry can sneak his way into the rotation and get some looks. So I'll go with Sean Terry. I think there's multiple ways where he can contribute, both on the offensive side and on special teams. I think that would probably be where he's most likely to contribute, but it'll be interesting to see how that goes. So there are some different names for you. And my eye is doing better if you were curious.
I like all those picks, especially Sean, because I do think, like you said, interested to see if they try him out at those returner spots. And no matter if he ends up contributing or not, or having many opportunities, I do think he, out of all the freshmen, is going to be just somebody that is fun to watch, period, in practice. And agree with you on Keegan, just to see. I mean, again, like, really there was no reason, I would say, to really declare him as the starter in the spring like Drinkwitz did, unless he was really confident in it. And then with Norfleet too, I mean, one to see how, if he's 100% back from that shoulder injury. Now I'm sure that'll be one of the first things we hear from Drinkwitz is Norfleet's health recovering from that and any other injuries on the team. So for my 3 players for my returner, I went with Joshua Manning. Just watching to see just how many steps he's taken. Like we talked about all offseason, it's him and Kevin Coleman to lead that wide receiver room. And then for a transfer, I'm also on the offensive line. I have Jalen Early, just because I'm interested to see, 1, where they're lining him up, and 2, if he's any good. Certainly he's proven that he's good now, but just what he looks like, and especially if he's getting snaps at left tackle, and how often that is, if he's swapping out with Javen Richardson at all there. And then for my freshman, I went with obvious choice, Donovan Ogbody. So there's that for you.
I had a feeling you were going to go. I had a feeling you were going to go with Donovan.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I made my picks in lieu of trying to pick someone that you wouldn't have.
You did a good job speculating there, then.
Yeah.
All right. On the defense, I'll switch things up and start this time. I have Darius Smith. Interested to see. Very athletic guy. Interested to see if he's lost any of that off of ACL surgery, and also for all of those edge rushers, what in the world that rotation looks like. And then for my transfer, Nate Johnson, sticking with the edges. Again, what that rotation looks like. Another incredibly athletic guy that I'm excited to see in person, see him work there. And then all 3 of my picks, coincidentally, are at the edge position, and my freshman is Javion Hilson for the same exact reason for those other 2 incredibly athletic guys that I'm interested to see just how ready Javion looks. Who do you have here? I hope it's not all 3 edges too.
It's not. I'm jealous of the Darius Smith pick. I wish I would have thought of that. My returner is Toriano Pride. We've talked about him enough, but when you think about the 3 returners in that cornerback room, obviously Drayden's pretty consistent. I think people expect him to be fine. And I've rambled here before about how Toriano and Nick DeLoach had their struggles last season. I thought about naming them both, but I think Toriano is the better of the 2. And I think the expectation is going to be that he has taken a large jump. Not that it's not the thing for Nick, but I think there's going to be some expectation there for Toriano. So interested to see what his development has looked like and if maybe he's cleaned up some of those mistakes that we saw from last season. My transfer is Josiah Trotter. Kind of the same rationale picking him and Keegan is that they were consistent. And Trotter was pretty dominant, but still a very consistent and steady presence for West Virginia. Can he do the same thing for Missouri? So that's kind of my big question there. But I would imagine so. He seems to be a pretty darn good player. I'm just also excited to see him play. I don't know a ton about him, so should be a fun watch. I also picked Javion Hilson for my freshman. When you look at the true freshman in this group, I think it's hard to pick out anyone else that's going to get playing time. Yeah, I'll stand on that. I don't think any other freshman is going to play. I mean, just list them off. Like there's Dayton Hopkins on the defensive line, and there's Jason Dowell as the defensive tackle, Dante McClellan and Jason King, and then Mark Manfred in the quarterback room. I don't think any of those guys are going to play. Maybe Dante McClellan, but I think Javion's the only lock to see the field this year, and he was the highest rated recruit in the class and is pretty darn good. I didn't know if redshirt freshmen fit into this category, so I will just float Elias Williams and Cam Keys out there. Those are guys who actually have very glowing reviews from this coaching staff, and they haven't been afraid to talk about those 2. It seems like their time will be soon, if not this season, the next one. So 2 guys to keep an eye on there. But I'll agree with Javion with you.
Yeah, I definitely agree as far as other freshmen on the defense getting playing time. I think if any, Dante McClellan, just because that's the only other freshman that Drinkwitz really highlighted as even having a chance really in the spring. Not to say that Drinkwitz doesn't think any other one has a chance, but that's at least from his mouth, from what he highlighted there. So yeah, Hilson definitely a guy to watch though, even in a pretty deep bedroom. So let's now go down the roster. We're not going to spend too much time on things we've already talked about, hopefully. But starting with quarterback battle, have to talk about it. It's already become an annoying thing on Twitter to talk about. As I put out there today, I think the idea that both the investment of NIL money in Bo Prabula is going to play a role in it, I just think is misguided and doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense why people would think that, but I truly believe that it is an actual competition. I, again, think Bo Prabula is going to win the job. I do think Bo Prabula is the better player, but ultimately we haven't seen a lot from Sam, even in the last year. It's not like we've been seeing him in practice. And on the same note of not overreacting to everything, though, we're going to have, and I'm sure every other reporter, eyes like a hawk on every single throw they make and reporting every single day. Bo made 8 of his 10 passes, but Sam only made 7. Don't look too much into that. We only see the first 20 minutes or so of practice. And the same thing for Mizzou football. Again, they're very intentional about what posts, what videos make their Twitter, and what parts the creative team is not allowed to film. So that's that. But as far as actually what we want to see from these quarterbacks, Drinkwitz has said that everything matters in the competition, that every detail that they do, leadership, actual performance on the field, plays into it. And I believe him there. I don't think there's necessarily like a checklist of what they want to see because they know the base profiles of these guys. And really it's, obviously just comes down to executing consistently. But there's a few things I'm hoping to see from both of these guys individually. I think for Bo and Sam, just because of the lack of playing time sample size, is just consistency. Because of a quarterback we know both these guys can make really good passes, but who's able to consistently do it. And then for Bo too, again, for both of them, quick decision making, because I think time with wide receivers plays into a lot of that connection with wide receivers. And as we've talked about before, Sam Horn would presumably have more connections with the guys who have been here for more than the last year. So, I mean, really, that's only Marquise, Joshua, Blood, and that's it in that room. But would have that with them at least. And on that same note of timing with the wide receivers, especially on the deep ball, and then on Sam Horn, especially, I mean, Dalen Carnell said he ran a 4.440 in the spring, like we talked about last week. I'd be interested to see his speed. And obviously, I mean, just how much, if any at all, that Tommy John surgery recovery is affecting him. So is there anything specific you have in mind to see from these two guys?
You hit on it a tiny little bit, but my biggest thing is I want to see the connection with the receivers. And maybe, I think that'll show, especially if, if we see that Bo is favoring Brett Norfleet or Sam Horn favors Marquise John, like whatever that looks like, might be a glimpse into what the offense could look like, which is maybe a bit of a stretch, but I do want to see them connect with the receivers and what the timing looks like, which is on the receivers as well, not just on the two quarterbacks. But yeah, that's really the only thing I had written down outside of RPO stuff with Bo. Not how good is he, but I just want to see what it looks like and how it operates in Missouri's aspect, because it's not something we've seen a ton of. So that's really all I had written down. I mean, yeah, we want to see him run and we want to see him, throw the ball. I don't know what we could say outside of that.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see, how their timing is with the receivers. We'd imagine that it's improving every single day and it's something they're working at. So I'll be curious to see what that looks like.
Right. And onto the running backs here, Ahmad Hardy. I'll just say this. I'm not looking at Ahmad Hardy to like see anything special with him, but what I would say is I'm excited to see him just work in person again. Because look, I've been on sidelines for NFL practices and standing right behind guys like Mercedes Lewis, who is 6'6", 270, and even a guy like AJ Dillon, who just has insane legs. And Ahmad Hardy is 19, 20 years old and is just a physical specimen. So I'm excited to see him work in action again. But the other things to watch here, I mean, Jamal Roberts, we pretty much know what he is. But I mean, again, I think he's a fun guy to watch in person. I think he's pretty shifty. But the main question that I just want to ask you, I mean, I think we've talked about Marquise Davis here before, but what makes him good, and do you think he'll be ready to play day one?
I think he's good at everything, which is why he'll be ready to play day one. He was involved in the receiving game in high school. He knows how to block, which is usually, I feel like for freshman running backs, that's usually like the biggest learning curve, is understanding the blocking schemes and the physicality aspect. But he is physical, he's big, and it sounds like a cliche, but like he's properly fast and has the strength to do so. He's faster than I thought he was. I think I had this vision in my mind of him as like a power back, and then I heard Eli Drinkwitz say that he's ridiculously fast at SEC Media Day. So I was like, I'm gonna make sure I'm not being stupid. And Eli is right, obviously, because he watches him practice and play. He's very fast. I really don't think he does anything bad right now, which you can't always say for freshman running backs. I talked about this and wrote about it a while ago. There's certainly a path to Marquise earning that, quote unquote RB2 spot by the end of the season. And then another interesting thing I wrote for this morning with previewing our running back room here is, who's up next? Who's the future? Well, like it's Ahmad Hardy and Marquise Davis. Like the future's on the roster right now, which is pretty fun to think about too. But yeah, I don't think he does anything bad. And I think it sounds cliche to say again, but he's got the proper amount of speed, the proper amount of strength. And I love his ability to hit holes and explode out of them. So I think he's absolutely ready to play right away. In my opinion, he's a more exciting runner than Jamal Roberts, which is the only reason I have questions about Jamal, because he's going to be expected to see an uptick in carries. Obviously with Marquise kind of hunting him down in that sort of aspect. So to answer your question, yes, Marquise Davis is ready to play right away.
All right, excited to see that. And yeah, like you said about the blocking, that's obviously pretty good way to see the field. And Jamal Roberts is pretty good at that. That was his not his main way to the field, because a lot of it was injuries, and he was really reliable whenever they slotted him in, but was definitely one of his best traits last year, and was, arguably better at it than both Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. On to the wide receivers. A lot of questions here that, again, the biggest things that we're going to find out won't really be until they hit the field. But one that we've been talking about all year, all off season, that's going to be interesting to see how the rotation is slotted in for is James Madison, just where he does fit in, because he's almost I would say, easy to forget in that group. But interested to see, on the outside, you're looking at Josh, Marquise, and then, really Donovan is the main one challenging him for the playing time there. So interested to see what opportunities Josh has. Also, who stands out as a run blocker, depending on how much we get to actually see of that. And then Xavier Lloyd, just where he fits into this group. Is he going to get playing time on the boundary? Or, because at the very least, he's insurance to have a veteran in that room. But what is his exact role, if much? So what are your thoughts on this wide receiver room going into this?
Yeah. What is James Madison up to? It's going to be hard for him to see the field. I think that's pretty clear. If you're tiering up this receiver room, Kevin Coleman's probably the top tier, but Kevin, Marquise, and Manning, like I said, are the 3 locks. I would say Donovan is the biggest challenger. And then you get down to Xavier Lloyd, Madison, Blood, maybe Sean Terry. But that's crowded. And I think Madison stands out a little bit because he's bigger than them. But he's also younger. He has a year in the room, but Xavier Lloyd is a veteran. Daniel Blood has been there for 3 years. So I think we both really like James Madison. He's definitely a talented player, and I think I want him to find a way onto the field. I really have a hard time seeing a path where that happens this season unless there's injuries. So there's that. As far as a blocker, run blocking, the guy that stands out to me is Josh Manning. I feel like I remember he was probably one of, if not the best of the group last year, and that's something you could always rely on him on. And then in terms of Xavier Lloyd, I only asked this question, but for the same reason we talk about James Madison, is he going to excel enough at one thing, and is he going to be able to beat out some of those guys? I think I mentioned this episode or 2 ago, but saying he could play that Mekhi Miller role of a guy who can come in and maybe get 10 receptions like the whole season, but he's a good leader and has good experience and can help out in those ways. So I don't exactly know where he slots in, but that might be a constantly changing rotation of guys. It wouldn't surprise me if it was. We could ask one question about Madison, Blood, and Lloyd, and Terry even as well, and we could make one reason why they should get playing time and one why it'll be harder for them. So that's the only reason I bring up Xavier Lloyd. It's interesting that they brought one in the spring. So I don't know, maybe if they see him in some sort of role specifically, but that's all I have.
Right. As far as run blocking, just because I was looking it up as you were talking, and this was what I remembered. Joshua Manning had the second most run blocking snaps out of any wide receiver last year. And Theo Weiss was just like 70 snaps ahead of him there. And then Luther Burden, obviously, a little farther down the list just because of his size. But, Joshua Manning is the biggest wide receiver on this roster. And I would say it's pretty, obviously with that size, pretty good at run blocking himself. So interested to see what they have there. Marquise Johnson, really, with his size, wouldn't expect him to be the most capable at it, but we know it's the emphasis for this roster to be able to black at the wide receiver position. All right, on to tight end. This is a position we've talked a lot about again, but the main thing I'm looking at that we can actually tell through practices is, does Jude James live up to the hype? Former 3-star recruit, but Eli Drinkwitz has talked very highly of him in the spring and in the past few appearances as well, as a guy that could make some impact. And I don't know exactly how that tight end rotation looks either, because for the past 2 years, it was Norfleet and Harris last year, and then the year before, Norfleet and Tyler Stevens, really. So again, as we've talked about all year, though, I expect the tight ends play a much bigger role. So what are you looking at here, Michael?
I feel like if we had to go back and look and watch and listen to each episode we have made, and we had to put a tally next to each player we've talked about that just doesn't play, Jude James would be at the top of that list, for good reason. He's fun, and it's very clear why Eli Drinkwitz thinks he could be a contributor. But it's the same thing with the receivers almost. There was a lot of experience in that room outside of Jude James, and he just hasn't proven himself yet. Maybe he's proven himself in practice, so that could be where he has a advantage over some other people. I remember them mentioning that he was getting reps last year when there were injuries, because I feel like there was a time where Tyler Stevens, Jordan Harris, and Brett Norfleet were all dinged up somehow. So I know for sure that he got some practice run with the twos at the very minimum last year. So that could be where he makes a difference. but you have Gavin, you have Vince Brown as well. There's a lot of talent in that room. So he's going to have to differentiate himself. But yeah, we talk about Jude James a lot here. So maybe secretly we're both rooting for him. Again, I think as a receiver, he brings more to the table than maybe others do when it comes to the backup. But at the same time, Jordan Harris proved that he can do that while being a good blocker. So, which was kind of his, not his. I mean, one of the main reasons he was seeing the field until he had to step up and play the receiving end of things. So, I don't think he's going to beat out Brett. Definitely not Brett, and probably not Jordan Harris. But maybe there's a third spot there for him.
Right. Yeah, there definitely was a time last year. I think it was during fall camp, where I think it was either all three of Norfleet, Stevens, and Harris, or two of them definitely Norfleet though, and Jude was slotted into the top spot for like a week to get some opportunities. So yeah, interested to see what he adds. Onto the offensive line, I mean, really no notes for me other than the competition at left tackle itself. Other than that, I mean, I think we'll have our answer pretty quickly if there's anyone besides Javen Richardson that's actually competing for that spot.
I do like the one note that you made about Caden Green. And I'm not going to go too in depth that we've talked about it before, but he's getting a lot of preseason attention, which obviously doesn't mean all that much. And I think at the end of last year, we could have both gone out of the way to say, hey, we think Caden Green's going to make a big jump and could be an NFL prospect, but he still has to prove it and make that jump. I think I don't remember what I wrote about it recently, but I said that there could be a bit of a learning curve there. And one more jump and one more, gap he has to get over that, says that he can make high-end plays and be a really consistent player, but he still has some mistakes sprinkled in. He's only a junior. I mean, not only a junior, but there's still, he still has some room for error. So that's my thing with Caden. I don't have any real concerns about him. Seeing him step up as a leader and be mistake-free during the fall would be nice to see, though.
Absolutely, and especially, I mean, there'll probably be like 1 or 2 days where we actually get to see reps like this and that they actually do more physical drills. But sometimes those offensive line versus defensive line drills where like a guy can just go and maul somebody, those are definitely fun to watch. So I definitely have my eye on Kid in those situations. And then I guess too with center, I mean, Connor Tolson, I mean, we know he's going to be ready for week 1. So I'm not really at this point, like, I'm not going to have like all eyes on him to see like what he actually looks like. But I mean, really just to see if there is any errors with Bo Perbula and Sam Horn as far as handoffs, and then probably timing as well. I'd imagine getting the cadence down is something you have to establish with a center and a quarterback. So when exactly does Connor Tolson return, and is he able to get that timing down with either of those quarterbacks?
On the topic of injuries, it's not an earth-shattering one, but Logan Reichert is also hurt, or still dealing with the injury. I think was Eli Drinkwitz's exact words at SEC Media Days. So one of those guys where I don't think we really know where he fits in. Probably slotted behind Dominic Giudice, but evaluating his health will be interesting as well.
Yes, definitely. On the defensive line, the big thing to watch here, and something that I think we can actually gather from practice, is the steps that Marquise Graciel is taking. I think that's the biggest thing for this defensive line, because we've talked about this group before, again, of like, I mean, their depth is fine. You're really confident in Chris McClellan. Sterling Webb, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a step he has to take, but more so just finding out if he can be the number 2 guy playing alongside Chris McClellan there. But Marquise Graciel, the big question for him is being able to turn into an every down player, as Al Davis said in the spring. So interested to see that. Interested to see, I mean, again, the defensive line rotation, if that's changed at all from the spring. But is there anything you're watching in that group, Michael?
No, I mean, nothing more than what you said. I think we've kind of naturally slotted in Sterling Webb as the second guy.
Yeah.
So he's going to have to prove himself there. Chris McClellan doesn't have to show us anything, obviously. I agree, though. I mean, Sterling has to show he's that guy. And if he doesn't, someone else has to show that they are. And if nobody does, then there's going to be some concern, which again, we've kind of naturally put Sterling in that position, but I don't think it's impossible that there isn't a clear number two after the fall, and that might be something that takes some time. So I think not just for Sterling or Marquise or for Jalen Marshall or for Braylon Henderson, but just in general, the number two slot, who's going to be the guy that takes the second most snaps.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point there. I would also say, yeah, for Braylon Henderson is a good reminder and name to bring up in this, because kind of the same thing in Xavier Lloyd. Like, okay, is he just insurance, or is he going to be actually getting a solid amount of playing time? All right, on edge, again, to skim over this, like we mentioned at the top, really, I mean, I'm interested to see Darius Smith. I'm interested to see Nate Johnson. I'm interested to see Javion Hilson. All of those guys in the bottom three. I mean, I don't have any questions about Damon Wilson and Zion Young, really. But what does that rotation look like? How often are they swapping out? Anything in mind for you there, Michael?
No, not really. I'll be curious to see if this is not like an earth-shattering thing either, but like Dayton Hopkins out of high school. So maybe see if he's put on any early weight. And I feel like Darius Smith was also listed on the smaller side. I mean, 6'5", 230, so that's not particularly small, but yeah, that's really that's not very important, but just for the sake of the future. I mean, Dayton Hopkins, I guess there's a universe where he has to contribute, but just sorting out that rotation. There's so many players there and so many good ones, a lot of mouths to feed, and I think it's a position where you can rotate pretty easily based on the down and who you're facing. And there was a lot of guys that played last year, so they'll definitely be able to play them all, but just finding out who lies where and how they're going to do so.
Absolutely. And then to defensive back, corner and safety here. I mean, for both these positions, again, I mean, who's giving cornerback number 2 snaps on the boundary between Stephen Hall, Toriano Pride, and Nick DeLoach? How often are they rotating? At safety, really, we know our 3 starters, but is Most Phillips getting playing time? I mean, is Santana Banner? And I mean, that seems a little more farther down the line, and I'd be a little more surprised by that than I would be for most. And then Trajan Greco as well. Where does he fit into all of this? So that's what I got on cornerback. Again, there's just a lot to see as far as what the initial depth chart looks like. So anything on the defense backs or defense at all to round it out?
No, I mean, with the defensive backs, Stephen Hall and Trajan Greco are the 2 guys I'm the most curious about. Just where they lie in the rotation. So not anything different from what you said, but just kind of pinpointing early on where they stand. And if maybe like there could be a chance that Trajan is taking a big jump and he's higher up than we may have thought he was. That's kind of what I had in the back of my mind, that's a possibility. So something to keep an eye on, I guess, but nothing specific. It's just going to be one of those positions where there's a lot of talented players. I mean, the cornerback spot as well, but especially in the safety room, there's a lot of talented players and a lot of new ones. So it'll just be interested to see how that rotation turns out. But I think they can rotate, so it's not going to be a concern this guy's not going to play that. I mean, someone's going to play less than others, right? But just figuring out how it happens and who plays when, who plays against who will be pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And then finally for special teams, I mean, they got a new punter. I mean, is Connor Wesselman good? just seeing what he's up to. And then for Blake Craig, I mean, there's a session at the start of every practice, near the start of every practice, right after warmups, where they do kicks. So Blake Craig will have a lot of eyes on him once they get into that 40 range. And we'll be able to report on how much he makes or misses from there. So that's that. That's a roster breakdown, things to watch for this fall camp. Again, we'll be there at every practice, watching all these things and reporting on it, both on our Twitter feeds And also we'll have a notebook for every day of practice that we're allowed to see. So any final notes to end us off on, Michael?
Nothing against the state of Nebraska, but I am ready to be back in Columbia. There comes a time in the summer where you start to get the itch when you're ready to go back to school, but the football season's creeping up. I mean, it's a couple days away from being exactly a month out. So I don't know about you, but I'm ready. It's going to be nice to get a taste of it next week for fall stuff. So I'm really excited. I've said this before, and it's not a secret, but this is a team that I'm not saying they're going to be worse than any of the prior two in our college experience, but definitely the team with the most questions and the most new players at key positions. So just getting some first glances not only should be interesting, but it should be fun. These are guys who've been talking about all summer, but really we don't know what we're saying because they haven't played in a Missouri uniform yet. So just getting some early impressions of these guys should be really exciting. It's also just going to be good to be back in Columbia. So I'm really excited for a lot of reasons to get out of Nebraska.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, fall camp, training camp is just such an exciting time for everybody around the team because, I mean, just full of optimism. No losses yet. Everybody's undefeated. We haven't wrote any bad stories yet. Haven't asked any bad questions. So there's all the optimism in the world for the season. And to your point there too, I'm interested to what were you going to say there?
I would just say it's a clean slate. New year.
Yes, exactly. And to your second point there, I'm interested to see and hear what the team has to say about their mindset entering this year, because there's something to prove thing. I understand why they say it, but I think it still holds for this year, and I think they're still saying it this year internally. But I'm interested to hear what they have to say on the fact that there is good reason to be unsure about this team. So I'm interested to see if they have that same excited uncertainty, if that's where their excitement and motivation comes from, of not knowing exactly what the team is going to look like and therefore their potential is limitless or whatever, or if it's more so we are really confident that we know what we have and we're really excited to show it off. So we'll hear from a lot of members of the team here this upcoming weekend right before the camp starts. So be sure to tune into all of our coverage over there on Missouri Tigers on SI. And we appreciate you tuning in to this episode and hope you do the same throughout all of fall camp and then once the season kicks off.